You think death is a moment. 1 second you are here, the next, you are gone. A switch flips somewhere inside you, the screen goes flat, and the story ends. But the real answer is far stranger, because death is not a switch. It is a process, slow, layered, and full of activity nobody ever told you about. And in the minutes after your heart stops, your brain may do something no one expected. It may come alive, not in the way you imagine, not the warm light, not the tunnel from the movies, something quieter, and somehow more astonishing. A surge, a flood, a final storm of electricity unlike anything in your ordinary waking day. To understand why, you have to forget the flatline. The flatline is a Hollywood invention. On screen, the heart stops and a single beep stretches into a long dead tone, and everyone in the room goes still. But your heart and your brain are two different organs, running on two different clocks. When the heart stops, the brain does not switch off with it. It is suddenly cut off, starved. And starving is not the same as silence. Think of what really happens. Your heart stops pushing blood. Within seconds, the oxygen still floating in your skull begins to run out. Your neurons, the tiny cells that carry every thought you have ever had, start to panic. And a panicking brain is not a quiet brain. So what does it actually do? For decades, nobody could answer that, because nobody was watching at the right moment. Death is unpredictable. You cannot schedule it. You cannot wire someone up and wait. The dying brain was a locked room, and no one had the key. Then, in 2013, a scientist named Jima Borjigin did something simple and strange. She was studying rats at the University of Michigan, recording their brain activity, when several of them died during an unrelated experiment. Most researchers would have thrown that data away. She looked closer, and what she saw did not make sense. In the 30 seconds after the rats' hearts stopped, their brains did not fade. They erupted. A massive, organized surge of gamma waves washed across the dying brain. Gamma waves are the fastest rhythms your brain produces. They are the signature of intense focus, of vivid memory, of the moments when you are most awake, most aware, most you. And here they were, exploding in creatures that were, by every medical definition, already dying. The brain was not shutting down. It was lighting up. Borjigin called it a surge of conscious-like activity. The brain, cut off from oxygen, was firing in patterns even more synchronized than normal waking life. More connected, more alive. As if, at the very end, every part of the mind reached out for every other part at once. But these were rats. The obvious question hung in the air. Does the same thing happen in you? For 9 years, no one could say. You cannot ethically wire a dying human and wait for the moment. It would take an accident, a coincidence so precise it almost never happens. And then, in 2022, it happened. An 87-year-old man was brought into a hospital after a fall. He had epilepsy, so doctors fitted him with an EEG, a cap of sensors that reads the electrical activity of the brain. They wanted to watch for seizures. While he was wired up, recording every flicker of his mind, he had a sudden heart attack, and he died right there, with the machine still running. For the first time in history, scientists had a continuous recording of a human brain crossing the line between life and death. A neurosurgeon named Ajmal Zemmer, working with researcher Raul Vicente, studied the data, and in the 30 seconds before and after the man's heart stopped, they found it. The same thing Borjigin saw in her rats. A surge of gamma waves. The exact brain rhythm linked to memory recall, to dreaming, to flashing back through a moment of your life. Think about what that means. The brain rhythm that fires when you remember your childhood, when you replay a face you love, when you dream, was firing at full strength in a dying man's mind. Is that the famous life review? The flashback people describe at the edge of death? No one can say for certain. It was a single patient, an old man, an injured brain. Science does not build a law from one moment, but it lined up with the rats. It lined up with decades of stories, and it cracked the locked room open just enough to look inside. So here is what the evidence suggests happens in the minutes after you die. Your heart stops. The blood stops moving. For a few seconds, almost nothing changes, because your brain is still floating in leftover oxygen. You would still be conscious, if anyone could check. People rescued from this exact window often remember it. They heard the room. They felt hands on their chest. Then the oxygen runs low, and the surge begins. Across your cortex, the wrinkled outer shell where thought happens, a wave of gamma activity rises. Highly ordered, highly connected. The most awake your brain may ever be, arriving at the moment it has the least reason to be. And then slowly, it fades. Not in a single drop, but in stages, like a city losing power one district at a time. How long does the whole thing last? Longer than you would guess. Brain cells do not die the instant the blood stops. They have reserves. They can hold on for minutes, not seconds. In rare cases, under cold conditions, far longer. This is the entire reason CPR works at all. You are not restarting a dead brain. You are reaching one that is still, faintly, hanging on. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If the brain is still active for minutes after the heart stops, is any of it aware? A doctor named Sam Parnia at NYU has spent his career chasing exactly exactly this. He runs studies on patients who go into cardiac arrest and are then resuscitated, brought back. In his research, a striking number of these people report something. Not nothing, not blank. They describe perceptions, a sense of separation, a review of their lives and how they treated others, and in some cases, verifiable details about the room they should not have been able to know because their hearts had stopped and their eyes were closed. Parnia is careful. He does not claim this proves a soul, or a heaven, or life after death. He calls it a real and structured experience of dying that medicine has ignored for too long. The brain, in its final minutes, is doing something, and whatever that something is, it leaves people changed. You might expect the dying brain to be a place of terror. It is not what people describe. Across cultures, across centuries, across thousands of accounts collected by researchers like Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia, the same notes keep repeating. Calm, peace, a loss of fear, a feeling of being held rather than falling. Why would evolution build that? Why would the most frightening event of your life arrive wrapped in calm? No one knows. But consider this. The same chemicals and rhythms that flood your brain in those moments are tied to your deepest memories and your strongest sense of meaning. It is possible that the dying brain reaches for the things that mattered most. The faces, the moments, the story of who you were. A last, total act of remembering, performed by an organ that spent your whole life doing exactly that. That is the strangest part of all of this. Your brain is a memory machine. From your first morning to your last, it is constantly recording, sorting, replaying, deciding what to keep. And the evidence now suggests that at the very end, when there is nothing left to plan for and no tomorrow to prepare, it may do the only thing it has ever truly known how to do. It remembers you to yourself. Now bring this back to today, to right now, to you sitting here, heart beating, oxygen flowing, taking all of it for granted. You have spent your life treating death as the opposite of being alive. A wall, a full stop, an off. But that is not what the science is showing. Death looks less like a wall and more like a slow horizon. A fading, not a snapping. A process your brain meets not with panic, but with a final blazing flash of the very thing that made you a person at all. Awareness, memory, meaning. So what does that change? Maybe this. If your final minutes are built from the moments you collected along the way, then you are writing that ending right now. Every face you really look at, every memory you let yourself feel, every ordinary day you actually showed up for instead of scrolling past. You are not just living your life. You are stalking the storm, filling the room your mind may one day reach back into. The man on the EEG did not get to choose what surged through him in those last 30 seconds. Neither will you. Your dying brain will reach for whatever you gave it. The depth of your attention now becomes the depth of that final wave later. You think death is a moment, but it is not. It is the long electric afterglow of a life spent paying attention, and for one strange and luminous while, you are still there inside it, remembering everything you ever chose to keep.